Breathitt County, Kentucky, a place with a past so steeped in violence that the press started calling it Bloody Breathitt. And I'm about to tell you that story. Kentucky. Mention that state, and people often picture bluegrass, bourbon, and maybe a few horse races and possibly coal mining. But if you bring up the topic of blood feuds, the mind drifts to the Hatfields and McCoys, two families split by a state line, taking pot shots at each other for decades. But Kentucky, well, it's got a few other bloody sagas that would make even the Hatfields and McCoys look like a backyard scuffle. Let me tell you about Breathitt County in the early 1900s. The press called it Bloody Breathitt for a reason. A small town simmering with more than just tension, but raw violence. One of the more brutal sagas from this place, the Hargis-Cockrell feud. Think you know your small town dramas? This one's got politics, guns, and a body count. Jackson, the county seat, was the stage for this tale of blood and bullets. Back then, the population was only about 1,000. Today, it's barely double that. It's a place where politics and power were as important as coal and timber. The town of Jackson itself started out as Breathitt Town, named after a governor, but then changed to honor Andrew Jackson, America's favorite backwoods hero. But its real heroes were the men holding the reins of power, like the local judge James Hargis, a Democrat with a taste for the dirty side of politics. And that was the real business in the early 1900s. Politics. Dirty, bare-knuckle politics. And as you'll see, deadly politics. In 1901, Hargis got himself elected county judge, alongside his buddy Ed Callahan as sheriff. Not everyone liked that. James Marcum, a local Republican lawyer, wasn't about to let Hargis and his cronies have free rein. A showdown brewed, but in typical fashion, before fists could fly, the guns came out. And no surprise, it escalated from there. Marcum paid his fine and walked away. But Hargis, he wasn't done. He had a personal vendetta bubbling under the surface, like a pot left to boil over. You see, a relative of the local judge had killed Hargis's brother. So when it came time for Marshal Cockrell to arrest Hargis, the tension hit a boiling point. He surrendered, but only to his pal Callahan. And everyone knew this wasn't the end. A year later, the dam broke. A barroom argument between Ben Hargis and Tom Cockrell ended with guns blazing. And by the time the dust settled, Ben was dead. His dying words, "Don't seek revenge." But you know how these things go. His family wasn't about to let it go. Charges were pressed, trials were moved. Cockrell, the killer, brought a dozen armed men to court. He was acquitted. But justice? That was a pipe dream. It didn't end there. Things rarely do in these blood feuds. That spring, Dr. Cox, a friend of the Cockrell family, got lured to his office late one night, only to be gunned down in the street. Breathitt County turned a blind eye, as they always did, and the bodies kept piling up. By July, James Cockrell, the town marshal mind you, was murdered in broad daylight. Same spot where Dr. Cox had fallen. No arrests, just whispers, and the town carried on as if it didn't just witness a public execution. The violence in Breathitt was like a Shakespearean tragedy, with more bullets and fewer soliloquies. By now, over 30 people were dead. Witnesses were silenced with fists, or worse. Nobody felt safe. The whole county was a pressure cooker, ready to explode. And explode it did. James Marcum, the man who had the nerve to stand up to Hargis, was next. In May of 1903, he was gunned down on the courthouse steps. Sounds eerily familiar to my Welch episode of McDowell County, doesn't it? The shooter? Smoke and mirrors, according to Hargis and Callahan. Convenient. A couple of lackeys were convicted, but Hargis? He wriggled out of the law's grip every time, until he couldn't wriggle anymore. The final twist in this blood-soaked saga? In 1908, James Hargis' own son, Beach, shot him dead. 5 bullets. a family argument. The end of a line, but not the end of the story. Breathitt County's bloody legacy lives on, a tangled web of revenge and power where family ties blur the lines between loyalty and hatred. And that body count, it's estimated it's well over 100 souls. Fast forward over a century. Jackson, Kentucky, a town still wrestling with the long shadows of its past, finds itself confronting new battles. The coal that once drove the region's economy has dried up. What remains? Poverty, job loss, and a fight for survival that feels no less brutal than the feuds of old. The ghosts of bloody Breathitt still linger. Then comes J.D. Vance, author of Hillbilly Elegy, and now a U.S. vice presidential candidate, and someone with roots in these hills. Vance's mother was born in Jackson, and his family, like so many others in Appalachia, was marked by addiction, hardship, and the complicated legacy of the region's economic decline. His book has become a lightning rod for discussions about the future of rural America, about the struggle of places like Jackson, places written off as Trump country or forgotten America. Vance is a polarizing figure, and his narrative has struck a chord, for better or worse. To some, he represented the voice of a region in pain, a region trying to make sense of its past while grappling with a future that often seems bleak. To others, he oversimplified Appalachia's struggles, reducing a complex tapestry of people and history to a morality tale of personal responsibility versus victimhood. But regardless of which side you fall on, here's the truth. Jackson, Kentucky endures. This is a place where history clings to every corner, every hill. The old feuds may be buried, but the fight for survival, that's as raw as ever. So next time you think of Kentucky, remember that it's not all horse races and bourbon. There's blood in the soil here. There are stories dark and tangled that stretch back for generations. And they aren't forgotten, not by the people who live them. And in that is something important we should all take note of about the struggle for identity and dignity in a changing world. Just a reminder, this is history. It's messy, it's tragic, and more often than not, it's forgotten. But history's also still happening, and I'm doing my part to highlight and share these stories of the past while showing you the places of today. I'm Josh, and this has been a Mountain Roots production. Thanks for watching.